about the Bible Belt and critical race theory. And it's July the 16th, and it's you know where Fish is out here? Yeah, it's like we got a school like right next door, and then the top floor we got that whole level up there. So that's why I'll be doing the lecture. And it's free. Like the first hour will be about the Bible Belt, then be like a little intermission, you know, feeding people a little bit. Then I'll be breaking down what critical race theory is. Because a lot of our people don't know what it is.
I'm Dr. Ashley Bachnight-Claybrook.
So we dealing with a doctor, right?
I have to say it. I don't know. I would say it has to help. You know?
You got anything to back that up, or you just guessing?
I'm just guessing.
So sis, what is the Bible Belt to you?
The Bible Belt is a series of states that heavily focus on Christianity as a means of political and social foundations for everything they do.
Good, because you should always know where you come from. You should always know history. You should always know what it is and what it ain't. And why people act the way they act now.
The Bible Belt, do you feel that it hurts black people? Kind of like get rid of the history, get rid of certain things that were done during slavery, or just certain things about our history in schools and stuff like that.
It's cultural, it's environmental, and it's effective.
Okay, you say it's effective now?
It can be positive and it can be negative. It just depends on your standpoint.
Preacher man, gotta wait your turn. Gotta get my brothers and sisters. They survive my only concern. This shit has gotta stop. They lock and pop everything they see. Behind a badge of police, they kill us with their knees. Nigga, please.
We look at systemic racism of, say, the school systems, the differences in the school systems, and looking at gentrification, looking at issues of textbooks, even as simple as textbooks, and how race plays a part in how people are selecting certain parts for different races depending on where they are. You throw in economics with that as well. All that is tied into, if you can show a pattern of systemic racism, that is critical race theory.
I say critical race theory, it needs to be taught in school. I think just to know what was done to us, because like a lot of people don't know about slavery. They don't know what was done during their time.
I think it hurts because I think we should, know our culture and, not be racist, you know what I'm saying?
It's a psycho drama. Our minds, they wanna melt. We got it, take my nigga shit, burn that Bible Belt. This is psycho drama. Our minds, they wanna melt. We got it, take my nigga shit, burn the Bible Belt.
Oh wait, shit. Hold on one second. Shit. Yeah, hold on one second. Good boy. Show me something.
With auto control would have worked. Me was wired. About some time or about a couple minutes.
Yeah, go check it.
So you ready or I can
No, hold on. I got the conference line is down.
Oh.
Give me a second. There's always something that you gotta pay for, bro.
I got a baby coming this weekend.
Dang. The Lord gonna work that through though. Shit.
Huh?
The Lord gonna work that through though.
You said what?
The Lord gonna work that through.
Yeah, kinda know, but it's tight right here. Tight right now. Yeah, with them you gotta, to get it reconnected, you can't just put a card in and say you run it. You gotta go contact them and tell them to run it. After you switch the card, you gotta switch the card over, then you gotta contact them and say, okay, go ahead and run the card and do what you do.
Gotta do what Oprah conference. I just put a little restring. I just put my account in. Just went through the last month bill. Play the other intro or play the other intro to kill time or
Yeah, keep playing the intro.
no.
Well, I'm doing a lecture about the Bible Belt. Well, I'm doing a lecture about the Bible Belt. Well, I'm doing a lecture about the Bible Belt and critical race theory. And it's July the 16th. And it's, you know where I.S.U.P.K is out here? Yeah, it's like we got a school like right next door. And then the top floor, we got that whole level up there. So that's why I'll be doing the lecture. And it's free. Like the first hour will be about the Bible Belt. Then be like a little intermission, you know, feeding people a little bit. Then I'll be breaking down what critical race theory is. 'Cause a lot of our people don't know what it is.
I'm Dr. Ashley Bachnight-Claybrook.
So we dealing with a doctor, right?
I have to say it. I don't know. I would say it has to help. You know?
You got anything to back that up, or you just guessing?
I'm just guessing.
So sis, what is the Bible Belt to you?
The Bible Belt is a series of states that heavily focus on Christianity as a means of political and social foundations for everything they do.
Good. Because you should always know where you come from. You should always know history. You should always know what it is and what it ain't. And why people act the way they act now.
The Bible Belt, do you feel that it hurts black people?
Kind of like get rid of the history, get rid of certain things that were done during slavery, or just certain things about our history in schools and stuff like that.
It's cultural, it's environmental, and it's effective.
Okay, you say it's effective now.
It can be positive and it can be negative. It just depends on your standpoint.
Bells gotta burn. Preacher man, gotta wait your turn. Gotta get my brothers and sisters. They survive my only concern. This shit has gotta stop. They lock and pop everything they see. Behind the badge of police, they kill us with their knees. Nigga, please.
We look at systemic racism of, say, the school systems, the differences in the school systems, and looking at gentrification, looking at issues of textbooks, even as simple as textbooks, and how race plays a part in how people are selecting certain parts for different races depending on where they are. You throw in economics with that as well. All that is tied into, if you can show a pattern of systemic racism, that is critical race theory.
I say the critical race theory, it needs to be taught in school. I think just to know what was done to us, 'cause like a lot of people don't know about slavery. They don't know what was done during their time.
I think it hurts because I think we should, know our culture and, not be racist, you know what I'm saying?
It's a psycho drama. Our minds, they wanna melt. We got it, take my nigga shit, burn that Bible Belt. This is psycho drama. Our minds, they wanna melt. We got it, take my nigga shit, burn the Bible Belt.
So we can't use the same card.
Yeah, wait. I'm just waiting for her.
You are the first participant on this meeting. Please hold while we wait for others to join.
We're good.
That's why you ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. One more text messages. That's now ready. All right. It'll be in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Gone.
Shalom, Lord Christ, is Officer of 1,000 Yahweh, and this is the Monday Night History class. Today's topic is the Spanish-American War. So, during this time, just gonna get right into it. During this time, it was like America had interest inside of the Caribbean area. They had interest inside the Caribbean area, but the Spain currently owned it. Like they owned Puerto Rico, Cuba, and a couple other countries down in the Caribbean. And basically, America wanted it so that they can, increase their territory. Just like any devil, they wanted the land so they can have more slaves, more, whatever, just subjugated to America, right? Sorry, let's get into it. The Spanish-American War from April 21st to August 13th in 1898 was a period of armed conflict between Spain and the United States. Hostilities began in the aftermath of the internal explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor in Cuba, leading to the United States intervention in the Cuban War of Independence. The war led to the United States emerging predominant in the Caribbean region and resulted in U.S. acquisition of Spain's Pacific possessions. It led to United States involvement in the Philippine Revolution and later to the Philippine-American War. The main issue was Cuban independence. Revolts had been occurring for some years in Cuba against Spanish colonial rule. the United States backed these revolts upon entering the Spanish-American War. There had been war scares before, as in the Virginia's affair in 1873, but in the late 1890s, American public opinion swayed in support of the rebellion because of reports of concentration camps set up to control the populace. So they set up concentration camps to control the Hispanics that's down there. They already, went down there and, took their land, took all of their, resources, and now they got them in concentration camps. So that shows you that even Hitler, when he was killing off the fake Jews, right? He learned everything from America. Everything he learned at concentration camps on how to oppress people, he learned that strictly from America. And we're gonna get into it. And even the one thing that I was bringing out not too long ago when I was saying about the gun control, when they wanted to keep weapons out of black people's hands, we're gonna also see that happen again. In one of these stories I'm gonna go through with you. So basically, they wanted to keep, they don't want to have them a gun, they don't want them to have weapons to fight back. That's the same thing Hitler did with the fake Jewish people. When you want to oppress the people, first thing you do is tell them, hey, you don't need weapons. We gonna protect you. So then, but who gonna protect you from them? That's the problem. They give you this sweet message, make you think that you're supposed to love them and have faith on them, but you always know what the Bible say. We look for their vain help. You know what I'm saying? We just looking for it. They don't give us help. They vain help is destroying us. Whatever the little bit of help they try to give us, they give you food stamps, but they got your whole family as slaves to America. But they'll give you, a couple $100 in food stamps a month. Right? Which don't even matter because all the places that they pay, you might get the food stamps, right? But then everybody know you gotta pay taxes on your check, don't you? You understand that, right? You got the income tax check. They gotta take your money out of your check and give it back to taxes, right? All of that goes right back to them. It was a time where you used to just pay your taxes at the end of the year that you put on all your money, but they said, nah, we don't need to do that. We just gonna take it out of your check, automatically. We just gonna take it out. So they started doing that. So it's a lot of different things. So they don't want to keep black people. They don't want you to be able to fend for yourself. Go ahead.
Well, that I'm saying, like, I hear a lot of brothers and sisters in slavery say, I need to do a double shift. And I need to work doubles 7 days a week. The bad part about that is the more you make for them, the more they take back from you.
Yep.
Because of the taxes. You know what I'm saying? With Lamentations 4:17. As for us, our eyes are yet failed for our vain help.
Yep.
In our watching, we have watched for a nation cannot save us. We always depend on them. Like, every time some go like, oh, you gotta get a job. That's why we speak on the streets every time. We talk about the white man, the devil, and all that. Oh, you gotta go get a job. You gotta go do this. Yeah, you gonna get a job. You know what I'm saying? You work. I don't know. It ain't no different like in slave time. You pick their cottons, work their fields just to have a roof over your head. That's all you work for. You ain't working for the true freedom that the Most High had set us, you know what I'm saying, through the time of Moses, follow the law, statutes, and commandments. Where I was to follow their ways, like in Revelation 8:18 and 4. Well, I was to follow their ways and wonder why I'd be like, oh, God, God, you worship an image. You worship an image that suppressed you, that, you know what I'm saying, took you over here, beat you, raped you, put our kids in cages. You know what I'm saying? Have us living in the worst condition ever. If you pray to him, that's why your prayers ain't getting answered. Are you?
God, throw out. So, but yeah, it's just amazing, man. They give you just a little bit, but they take more. Like, even with the money situation, you know, the money is not even real. The money that you're working for isn't even real. You understand that? It's not real. All it is paper. And there's some instances it's not even paper. It's just numbers on a computer that says this is what you have. Right? You got tokens. Right? And they can change the tokens whenever they want to. Right? The money you have is nothing. It doesn't mean anything. But they got you fighting tooth and nail over it. And it's not worth anything. It's not worth the paper is printed on. But you fighting tooth and nail for it, right? Like I even heard of a saying that I think it was one of the Rothschilds. You know what Rothschild said? Rothschild said, "Give me the ability to print money, and I don't give a damn who's in office." Right? If anybody don't know anything about the Rothschilds, that's a banking family of fake Jewish people. They like a large banking family. They run pretty much all of the banks. They run the International Bank. They run the IRS. They run the American banks. They run all of the banks. Right? And they're the ones that does everything when it comes to banking. So you're talking about a very, very wealthy family that their money can't, and which is interesting about them is that their money can't even be quantified because they own the banks. So you can't even see how much net worth they actually have, because whatever they want something, they can do, they can just print the money and buy it from wherever. So they basically have an infinite amount of wealth. Anybody understand what I'm saying? That's a fake Jewish family. They have an infinite amount of wealth. They can buy whatever they want because they print the money. They print the money. All they gotta say is, "Hey, I want to buy, 100 acres." All right, let me go ahead and go to the computer. How much it costs? Okay. Type it up. It's in their account. Write you a check for it. It's not worth anything though. Like usually when you trade something, you put a barter, like get some gold, something of wealth, or something that means something. They just gonna write something in the computer and say, "Okay, here you go. That's your money. That's for the land." But the land is actually something. It's something tangible. But what they gonna give you is numbers on a piece of paper, or numbers on a computer. So, but all right, let's get back into it. All right, yellow journalism exaggerated atrocities to further increase public fervor and to sell more newspapers and magazines. So, they would always, how our news is, they would always pump up something and make it seem like it was a lot more, a lot worse than it was. So they would, they would tell certain things that weren't all 100% true. All right, the business community had just suffered from a deep depression and feared that a war would reverse the gains. So, of course, like any country, if you know anything about economics, right, is the one thing that get anybody out of any type of, that gets you out of a depression is a war. Because people are going to invest. You're going to have, because like right now when things are slowed down, right? Of course, there's the war in Ukraine and everything, right? But things are, kind of, before that things were slowing down, right? There weren't any investment going on, because what would happen is when war happens, people would start investing money, throwing money in, and then so that businesses would start to boom, right? Businesses would start to boom, and then that can get people out of a recession. get the country out of a recession. All right. Accordingly, most business interests lobby vigorously against going to war. President William McKinley ignored the exaggerated news reporting and sought a peaceful settlement. However, after United States Navy armored cruiser Maine mysteriously exploded and sank in Havana Harbor on February 15, 1898, political pressures from the Democratic Party pushed McKinley into a war that he had wished to avoid. So because this boat or whatever had exploded, you know, this not this big boat, but it's like a battleship basically had exploded. So they said, yeah, we need to go to war then. So basically, they wanted to go into this land and do all of these things. They wanted to do all of that because of you know, it had interest in that land. Just like I don't think that people think that because the Democrats, you know, well, Democrats love black people and everything. They love black people, right? Don't think the Democrats ain't trying to get what they could get too. Just like the what was it? The Clintons. When Haiti had Haiti had the earthquake, they built 2 houses and spent the rest of the money on building they spent the rest of the money on putting up a resort to make, you know, they had like $100 million in there of your money on what you thought you were supporting. When you go to, you know, you go to Walgreens or Walmart or something, right? You go put it and say, hey, would you like to donate the rest of the change to Haiti? You think you donating to the Haitians, but you donating it to Bill Clinton in his pockets, right? Only 14% has to go to the actual cause. Of all the donations that you have, only 14% is required. And you can eat up that 14% by doing other things. You can have it as administrative costs, have high administrative costs. You got to buy cars to get around there. You got to buy a house for yourself so you can go to and fro. And then with all of that, you know, then they take the rest of the money and do whatever they please. That's why if you notice what like people that have a lot of money, that's why you see them donating to each other's charities. That's even what churches do. They donate to each other's charities because basically they can make the money, they ain't got to pay taxes on it, and it's just free money that they giving to each other. That's all it is. It's not, you think that they giving it to a charity, that's why you always see, like they say, okay, I gave $50,000 to this charity, and, you know, or, you know, I gave $50,000 to this basketball team, right? Only thing they got was a couple jerseys, right? Man, $50,000, everybody should have new cleats, new helmets, new knee pads, elbow pads, but all they got was some new jerseys that had the name of the person that donated it. That's all you get. Nike, you know, gave them $1 million. The only thing they get is the jerseys with the name on it. The rest of the money went into their pockets, man. Went straight to their pockets. It's called a bribe. That's what it's called. It's called a bribe. You think this country is all, you know, they stand by what they mean, that this is this country has integrity. This country don't have an ounce of integrity. All right? Let's see here. On April 20th, 1898, McKinley signed a joint congressional resolution demanding Spanish withdrawal and authorizing the president to use military force to help Cuba gain independence. So it want to help Cuba gain independence from Spain, right? We all think it's best for the Cubans, right? Let's keep going. In response, Spain severed diplomatic relations with the United States on April 21st. On the same day, the United States Navy began a blockade of Cuba. Both sides declared war. Neither had allies. This 10-week war was fought in both the Caribbean and in the Pacific. As United States agitators for war well knew, the United States naval power would prove decisive. allowing expeditionary forces to disembark Cuba against a Spanish garrison already facing nationwide Cuban insurgent attacks and further devastated by yellow fever. So they knew that our Navy was going to be strong in that area because, I mean, let's think about it, right? You know, we was going to have the Navy be able to fight because Spain is thousands of miles away, right? How far is Cuba from Florida? Matter of fact, hey Siri. How far is Cuba from Florida?
I'm not sure exactly how far it is from Tallahassee to Havana, Cuba by car.
Hold on a second. Hey Siri. How many miles is Miami from Cuba?
I'm not sure exactly how far it is from Havana, Cuba to Miami by car, but it's about 226 miles as the crow flies.
226 miles flying, right? 226 miles. That's a 4 hour car ride, right? Nowhere. But to go from, you know, Spain over to Cuba is thousands of miles, right? So it's easier for them to keep refreshing because, you know, when you have a military, you got to supply them with ammo, weapons, people, you know, more soldiers, just supplies in the war effort, right? Now they had a base there, but once you get rid of the base, that's all that they have. Now they have to send troops over there, and you can only send a certain amount of troops compared to America, which it's just a little bit off of their land, you know, their landscape. They could just keep supplying more and more troops, more and more supplies, and you know gives them a huge advantage in the war. All right. Go ahead.
It's saying the short distance from the airline between Cuba and Florida is 411.28 miles.
Okay, here you go. 411 miles. That's nowhere. That's nothing. Right? You can have ships going back and forth, taking people back and forth to Cuba to go fight against the Spaniards, right? All right. See it. Oh yeah, and plus they were still facing Cuban insurgent attacks. So they had a lot of Cubans that were, you know, trying to fight against them. So they getting attacked from both sides. They getting attacked from the native population because they was oppressing them harder than the Americans were. So they getting attacks from them and they getting attacked from America. So Spain really didn't have they didn't have a chance, really, right? And then they had the yellow fever and all of that. The invaders obtained the surrender of Santiago de Cuba and Manila, despite the good performance of some Spanish infantry units and fierce fighting for positions such as San Juan Hill. Madrid sued for peace after 2 Spanish squadrons were sunk in the battles of Santiago de Cuba and Manila Bay, and the third, more modern fleet was recalled home to protect the Spanish coast. Because they had to go back home because, you know, America, they didn't already defend it there. Now they got to call them to protect the coast of Spain. So now they got to protect their homeland, right? They getting their behinds whipped over there. Now they got to go back home because what if America decides they want to go attack them, you know, attack Spain? All of their resources, their military might is over here in Cuba. So they had to send them back home. The war ended with the 1898 Treaty of Paris, negotiated on terms favorable to the United States. The treaty ceded ownership of Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippine Islands from Spain to the United States, and granted the United States temporary control of Cuba. So that's how we got Puerto Rico and Guam, and you know, like Hawaii, all of those places. We got all of that. The cession of the Philippines involved payment of $20 million, which is $650 million today, to Spain by the U.S. to cover infrastructure owned by Spain. The defeat and loss of the Spanish Empire's last remnants was a profound shock to Spain's national psyche and provoked a thorough philosophical and artistic reevaluation of the Spanish society known as the Generation of 98. The United States, meanwhile, not only became a major power, but also gained several island possessions spanning the globe, which provoked rancorous debate over the wisdom over expansionism. So now they owned a lot more land. It was all a land grab. It was not to save the Cubans there, right? Okay, this is some of their interests in the Caribbean, right? Let me see here. In 1823, the fifth American president, James Monroe, enunciated the Monroe Doctrine, which stated that the United States would not tolerate further efforts by European governments to retake or expand their colonial holdings in the Americas. So they didn't want them to keep on expanding in the Americas because America like, we got this, you know what I'm saying? Or to interfere with the newly independent states in the hemisphere. The U.S. would, however, respect the status of the existing European colonies before the American Civil War. The Southern interests attempted to have the United States purchase Cuba and convert it into a new slave state. That's what they wanted Cuba for. They wanted a new slave state. The pro-slavery element proposed the Austin Manifesto of 1854. Anti-slavery forces rejected it. So, after the American Civil War and the Cuba's 10 Years' War, U.S. businessmen began monopolizing the devalued sugar markets in Cuba. In 1894, 90% of Cuba's total exports went to the United States, which also provided 40% of Cuba's imports. So they were extracting, 90% of their extractions was coming out of Cuba going to the United States, right? And the United States gave them 40% of their imports. So that's telling you, I'll even go with Cuba's total exports to the U.S. were almost 12 times larger than the export to Spain. U.S. business interests indicated that while Spain still had political authority over Cuba, it was the U.S. that had economic power over Cuba. So when that happened, you got Cuba or whatever, right? And he said 40% of their imports came from America. So that's telling you that America was supplying most of their, probably the larger portion of their imports so, they could survive. So say certain things that's not in Cuba that's made in the United States. Let's say, for instance, maybe not during this time, but let's just use it for an example. Let's use like a car or electricity. They're able to export that here to make the Cubans have a better way of life. This is like a method that our enemies use against us so that, we think we have like a better way of life or whatever, a more glamorous way of life, and they use that to, exploit us, right? Make us slaves to them. They give you a little bit of stuff, you get a TV, you get electricity, you get some AC, and all of a sudden now you slave to them. You a whole slave for some air conditioning, right? Did somebody just join?
Shalom, how about you, Mr. TITHES, Officer Zoyala,
Shalom, what's going on now?
Oh, to wow, so yourself?
I'm to wow.
Same prayer, sir.
Okay. So, this is part of the whole thing because they're trying to take over they're trying to take over Cuba, right? The U.S. became interested in the trans-isthmus canal in either Nicaragua or Panama and realized the need for naval protection. Captain Alfred Thayer Mahan was an exceptionally influent theorist. His ideas were much admired by future 26th President Theodore Roosevelt. As the U.S. rapidly built a powerful naval fleet of steel warships in the 1880s and 1890s, Roosevelt served as the Assistant Secretary of the Navy and was an aggressive supporter of an American war with Spain over Cuban interests. So they just wanted this land that, to help out America, right? Okay. Let me see here. Meanwhile, the Cuba Libre movement, led by Cuban intellectual Jose Marti until he died in 1895, had established offices in Florida. The face of the Cuban Revolution in the U.S. was the Cuban junta, under dealership of Thomas Estrada Palma, who in 1902 became Cuba's first president. The junta dealt with leading newspapers and Washington officials and held fundraising events across the U.S. It funded and smuggled weapons. It mounted an extensive propaganda campaign that generated enormous popular support in the U.S. in favor of the Cubans. Protestant churches and most Democrats were supportive, but business interests called on Washington to negotiate a settlement and avoid war. So all of this stuff is happening. They're trying to, they just try to get more power, right? Cuba attracted enormous American attention, but almost no discussion involved the other Spanish colonies of Puerto Rico, also in the Caribbean, or of the Philippines or Guam. Historians note that there was no popular demand in the United States for overseas colonial empire, because they know it had a lot of, the Americas, like North and South America, has a lot of resources that's been, especially early times, has been untapped, right? Nobody was touching it, right? And it's all free land, pretty much, right? It's all free land. Of course, they got natives there, but they'll say, well, we have better weapons, so we can beat the natives out. We can take their stuff from them, right? Spain, if we go to Spain or go to these other places, now they got home field advantage because they can more easily supply their troops with, get them supplies and more soldiers. So they don't want to have a large overseas empire. Now, do they have bases set up in different places? Of course, because you could put a base somewhere, but they didn't want to have a large empire. They just want to have influence. There's a big difference. If you have an empire, you have to 100% protect that empire, right? You have to, that empire, that's part of you. Let's say, I don't know, pick a country. Let's say Iran was part of America. It's part of, America. It's their interest. They want to own Iran, right? Now they got to contend with Iraq and all of the other countries all around that area to try to keep that place safe, right? Why not just put a base there? You put a base there to help their people keep the land safe. You still get their resources without giving a lot of resources of your own. You just give them some guns, teach them how to fight a little bit, which is what happened in Iraq and all the other, on all the other lands out there, right? They taught the people how to fight. Gave them weapons and ammo and rations and all of that. Let them fight for, their own freedom. And they just got taught by the Americans, right? And then, now you get the same thing that you wanted, which is the resources. You get the same thing you wanted all out of that country, but you don't have to expend your resources to do it as much as your resources to do it. It's a low investment, high return, right? Okay. Any questions on any of that so far? Okay. All right. All right, now this is another article. Beginning in 1492, Spain was the first European nation to sail westward across the Atlantic Ocean, explore and colonize the Amerindian nations of the Western Hemisphere. At its greatest extent, the empire that resulted from this exploration extended from Virginia on the eastern coast of the United States south to Tierra del Fuego at the tip of the South America, excluding Brazil, and westward to California and Alaska. Across the Pacific, it included Philippines and other island groups. By 1825, much of this empire had fallen into other hands, and in that year, Spain acknowledged the independence of its possessions in the present-day United States, then under Mexican control, and south to the tip of South America. The only remnants that remained in the empire in the Western Hemisphere were Cuba and Puerto Rico. Across the Pacific and Philippine Islands, and the Carolina, Marshall, and Mariana Islands, including Guam and Micronesia. So this is what Spain owned. So America wanted that land, right? Cuba, following the liberation from Spain of mainland Latin America, Cuba was the first to initiate its own struggle for independence. During the years from 1868 to 1878, Cubans personified by guerrilla fighters known as Mambises fought for autonomy from Spain. That war concluded with a treaty that was never enforced, of course, right? In the 1890s, Cubans began to agitate once again for their freedom from Spain. The moral leader of this struggle was Jose Marti, known as El Apostol, who established the Cuban Revolutionary Party on January 5, 1892 in the United States. Following the Grito de Baile, the call to arms on February 24, 1895, Marti returned to Cuba and participated in the first weeks of armed struggle when he was killed on May 19, 1895. All right. So he was trying to fight for Cubans to get them free from Spain. As you see, that they had a treaty. They were going to leave them alone, but they didn't follow. That's why Spain is no different from the American, Caucasians. They're all the same. They're just different tribes. The Philippine Islands. The Philippines too was beginning to grow restive with Spanish rule. Jose Rizal, a member of a wealthy mestizo family, resented that its upper mobility was limited by Spanish insistence on promoting only pure-blooded Spaniards. He began his political career at the University of Madrid in 1882, where he became the leader of Filipino students there. For the next 10 years, he traveled to Europe and wrote several novels and considered seditious by Filipino and church authorities. He returned to Manila in 1892 and founded the Liga Filipina, a political group dedicated to peaceful change. He was rapidly exiled to Mindanao during his absence. Andres Bonifacio founded Katipunan, dedicated to the violent overthrow of Spanish rule. On August 26, 1896, after learning that the Katipunan had been betrayed, Bonifacio issued the Grito de Balintawak, a call for Filipinos to revolt. Bonifacio was succeeded as head of the Philippine Revolution by Emilio Aguinaldo I.S.U.P.K, who had his predecessor arrested and executed on May 10th, 1897. Aguinaldo negotiated a deal with the Spaniards and exiled them to Hong Kong for 400,000 pesos that he subsequently used to buy weapons to resume the fight. So this was Filipino. Like, if you know anything about Filipinos, like they're like the lack of better term, the niggas of Asia. They're the ones that they use to they take everything from them and make them slaves. They're like that. That's how they are. They're like, they're not Israel. They, of course, they're the Japhites, right? But that's how they do all of the Japhites, because the Japhites are very peaceful people. So they took them and made them, slaves as well. So, and that's why you have, like, if you notice, like in boxing, we all, like, if you notice, all of the fighters, all of the best fighters, come from either, the projects in the hood in America, the barrios, they Puerto Rican, Mexican, where else? Jamaican fighters, Haitian fighters. Just look at what was his name? The big Haitian fighter. I can't think of his name right now. Man, I can't think of his name. Y'all gonna know what I'm talking about. The big Haitian he was fighting back in like 10 years ago. Dang, what's that man's name? But yeah, he was fighting everybody. So if you notice, we was always the ones fighting. We do all of that because, I heard a general say one time, he said that, you're not going to have many Caucasians be fighters, because why would they want to hurt their bodies? Subject themselves for money when they already own everything. They don't have to subject themselves for money. That's a poor people's sport. Boxing and playing football and basketball, that's a poor people's sport. That's why you notice they play a little bit and they get the hell out of it, and not all of a sudden they coaches and, they sports announcers. They play 1 or 2 years in the NFL, and all of a sudden they the sports announcer now, right? They don't want to, subject their bodies to that type of rigorous, training and, just beating their body down, right? Because they're not slaves like you, right? You was raised to beat your body down. That's how you got by. Your body was your asset to beat the hell out of it to make you a couple dollars, right? Okay. Puerto Rico, during the 1880s and 1890s, Puerto Ricans developed many different political parties, some of which sought independence for the island, while others, headquartered like their Cuban counterparts in New York, preferred to ally with the United States. Spain proclaimed the autonomy of Puerto Rico on November 25, 1897. Although the news did not reach the island until January 1st, 1898, and a new government established on February 12, 1898. The United States. The U.S. interest in purchasing Cuba had began long before 1898. I think we already spoke about that. They wanted the sugar interest and all of that. Here's the war. Following this declaration of war against Spain issued on April 25, 1898, the United States added the Teller Amendment, asserting that it would not attempt to exercise hegemony over Cuba. Let's look that up. Okay. Leadership or predominant influence exercised by one nation over others, as in a confederation. So they didn't want to. They were saying that they weren't going to rule over them. right? But here's what they do. They don't rule over you. They'll just pick you your presidents are. So they don't have to rule over you, right? 2 days later, Commodore George Dewey sailed from Hong Kong with Emilio Aguinaldo on board. Fighting began in the Philippine Islands at the Battle of Manila Bay on May 1st, where Commodore George Dewey reportedly exclaimed, "You may fire when ready, Gridley." And the Spanish fleet under Rear Admiral Patricio Montojo was destroyed. However, Dewey did not have enough manpower to capture Manila, so Aguinaldo's guerrillas maintained operations till 15,000 U.S. troops arrived at the end of July. On the way, the cruiser Charleston stopped at Guam and accepted its surrender from Spanish governor, who was unaware that his nation was at war. Although a peace protocol was signed by the two belligerents on August 12th, Commodore Dewey and Major General Wesley Merritt under the Army troops assaulted Manila the very next day, unaware that peace had been declared. In late April, Andrew Summers Rowan made contact with Cuban General Calixto Garcia, who supplied him with maps, intelligence, and a corps of rebel officers to coordinate U.S. efforts on the island. The U.S. North Atlantic Squadron left Key West for Cuba on April 22nd, following the frightening news that a Spanish home fleet commanded by Admiral Pascual Cervera had left Cadiz and entered Santiago, having slipped by U.S. ships commanded by William D. Sampson and Winfield Scott Schley. They arrived in Cuba late May. So they're all getting ready for war, right? The war for U.S., it began when they captured Guantanamo Bay and landed in 70 in Daiquiri, east of Santiago, that Cuba. So that's the second largest city on the island. So at that time, the Spanish, they had 150,000 regulars and 40,000 irregulars and volunteers, while rebels inside Cuba numbered as many 50,000. Total U.S. Army strength at the time, a total 26,000, requiring the passage of the Mobilization Act of April 22nd that allowed for an army of at least 125,000 volunteers. Later, it increased to 200,000 and a regular army of 65,000. On June 22nd, U.S. troops landed at Daiquiri, where they were joined by Calixto Garcia and about 5,000 revolutionaries. They attacked San Juan Heights on July 1st. All of that they charged up San Juan Hill and pushed Spanish troops further inland while inflicting 1,700 casualties. Go ahead.
Trooper Marshal, check this on the cross.
Excellent, of course. Zaki Tuab.
Tuab, sir.
What's on the cross? All right. Now, they pushed up that hill, inflicted the casualties. So, the Spaniards, they agreed to the unconditional surrender of 23,500 troops around the city. A few days later, Major General Nelson Miles sailed from Guantanamo to Puerto Rico. His forces landed near Ponce and marched to San Juan with virtually no opposition. Now they signed the Treaty of Paris, we talked about that already, and they bought, Spain and all that for $20 million. So the war had cost the United States $250 million and 3,000 lives. Of 90% had perished from infectious disease. So that was a good day for them. They got a lot. for that, right? Okay. Hold on a second. All right. This is one of the groups that fought in the war, right? It's called the Rough Riders. I know y'all heard of that before, right? And, who was that? Who was the Rough Rider? I know some of y'all old heads know. Go ahead.
It was DMX crew. You know, he had, you know what I'm saying, he had put up like a, basically like a rap group. He had DMX. You had like the so-called first Chinese rapper in that group as well. I'm not really up to about North music. So I know Rough Rider pretty much. DMX rap group. Yes.
Lucky Ottawa.
Go ahead.
You talking about Theodore Roosevelt?
No, I'm talking about the the Rough Riders, the entertainment group, all of that.
Oh, DMX, sir.
Yeah, and Locks.
Group. So lucky if I may.
Go ahead. You know, Azar. No, he's from New York, so he about to break it down. Go ahead, huh?
Got on concert. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it's Jada Kiss. Styles P. DMX was, I believe he was hired by Jada Kiss. But Jada Kiss was the boss. And Drag On, Eve, who married the devil, and a whole bunch of other crew. Had the whole bike, riding on bikes, and everybody thought that, UPK was Rough Riders, but we the Rough Prophets,
Go ahead.
Azariah, did they have the first Chinese rapper in that group?
I think it was MC Jin. I think that was the first. That MC Jin.
Okay.
That was one of the first ones. Yeah. They had DMX, Swiss Beats, Eve, Cassidy. So they had a couple people in there. Alright. That was the music group, but this is the real Rough Riders. It was a black group, a military group, right? The most famous of all the units fighting in Cuba, the Rough Riders, was the name given to the first U.S. volunteer cavalry under the leadership of Theodore Roosevelt. Roosevelt resigned his position as Assistant Secretary of the Navy in May 1898 to join the volunteer cavalry. The original plan for the unit called for filling it with men from the Indian Territory, New Mexico, Arizona, and Oklahoma. However, once Roosevelt joined the group, it quickly became the place for a mix of troops ranging from Ivy League athletes to Glee Club singers and Texas Rangers and Indians. So, probably had some Caucasian boys in there doing that because they went to the Ivy League or whatever. But they had the Texas Rangers and Indians, right? A lot of old Rangers was black people too. Roosevelt and the commander of the unit, Colonel Leonard Wood, trained and supplied the men so well at their camp in San Antonio, Texas, that the Rough Riders was allowed into the action. Unlike many of volunteer companies, they went to Tampa at the end of May and sailed for Santiago de Cuba on June 13th. There they joined the 5th Corps, another highly trained, well-supplied, enthusiastic group consisting of excellent soldiers from the regular army and volunteers. The Rough Riders saw a battle at Las Guasimas when General Samuel B.M. Young was ordered to attack the village. 3 miles north of Siboney on the way to Santiago. Although it was not important to the outcome of the war, news of the action quickly made the papers. They also made headlines for the road and the Battle of San Juan Hill, which became the stuff of legend thanks to Roosevelt's writing ability and reenactments filmed long after. So this was like a lot of African Americans was in this part here fighting, right? Hold on. Oh, my iPad frozen. So that was some of the people that was fighting. Hold on 1 second. iPad froze up on me. Give me 1 second. Try to refresh it. Okay. Can y'all hear me still? Conference call. Can y'all hear me?
Okay, sir.
Oh, you can still hear me? Okay.
I'm okay, sir.
I'm just checking, make sure internet was too wild. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Okay. Not sure what's happening here. Okay, I'll try to see if I can read it. Impressed by black soldier service in the Union Army during the Civil War, Congress created 6 all-black cavalry and infantry regiments in 1866, 1 year after the conflict ended, later consolidated into 4 regiments, the 9th and 10th Cavalry and the 24th and 25th Infantry. Black troops served mostly on the western frontier, helping build infrastructure, protect white settlers, and fight Native Americans. Their nickname, the Buffalo Soldiers, right, may have come from Plains Indians who likened their curly hair to buffalo fur and their fierceness in fighting to the mighty creature they revered. So they this was the Buffalo Soldiers. This was African American, Native Americans fighting against other Native Americans. And of course they so they wanted to send black people there. While soldiering on behalf of the government that abolished slavery only a few years earlier, black troops endured discrimination in the army. Repressive Jim Crow segregation and violent attacks from civilians, many of whom opposed the idea of black men with guns. They opposed that idea. They don't want you to have guns, man, because they feel as though you can fight against you. You can fight against something if you have, any type of way to defend yourself, right? See if I can get this to come up. Go ahead.
Come on, the water, sir. Just came to me. I was listening to the Rough Riders song earlier, and it's relevant to what, is going on right now in the world.
Mm-hmm.
What we talk about. I got a song called World War III. You know what I mean? It's a real fire. Let Edomites know what's going on. Lock it, sir.
They know. They definitely know. See if I can pull that back up. Okay. All right. Okay, in their push to capture the strategically important city of Santiago de Cuba, some 8,000 Americans battled for 2 nearby hills of San Juan Heights, including Roosevelt's volunteer regiment and some 1,250 black soldiers. Unlike in most U.S. wars, the fighting was an integrated effort. Regulars and volunteers, blacks and whites, fought side by side, endured the blistering heat and driving rain, and shared food and drink as well as peril and discomfort, wrote U.S. Department Defense Department historian Frank Schubert in 1998. They forced a victory that did not belong primarily to TR, nor did it belong mainly to the Buffalo Soldiers. It belonged to all of them. So, let me go here. Okay. Oh yeah, military officials, they also assumed that black troops had higher tolerance for tropical climates and immunity to tropical diseases, saw them as ideal soldiers to employ at Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines to help rout out the Spanish. Of all the 17,000 U.S. troops sent to Cuba, 3,000 were black. So, of course, they sent us to go fight, as well. So they didn't care about us dying. So that's why they sent us to go fight. Okay. Any questions on any of that?
Facebook.
Okay.
And no questions.
Okay. All right. U.S. troops landed in the southeastern tip of Cuba on June 22nd, 1898, with the goal of capturing the port city of Santiago de Cuba, where the Spanish were anchored. 2 days later, when engaging the enemy at Los Guasimas, the Rough Riders struck first, but they, along with other troops, were pinned down in a tense skirmish until the Buffalo Soldiers' 10th Cavalry Regiment arrived and forced the Spanish retreat. A week later, on July 1st, the Americans set out to take Kettle Hill and San Juan Hill, both high points in San Juan Heights, about a mile outside Santiago. Roosevelt's volunteers, along with regular enlisted troops, both black and white, were assigned to take the blockhouse atop Kettle Hill, while other regiments focused on San Juan Hill. So they split some up. Some went to Kettle Hill, while others went to San Juan Hill. The Rough Riders and Buffalo Soldiers from the 9th Cavalry were the first to reach the Kettle Hill summit, taking heavy Spanish fire during the ascent and engaging in hand-to-hand combat in the trenches. Roosevelt was slow when his horse snagged on barbed wire just below the crest of the hill, forcing him to proceed on foot the remainder of the day. After taking the blockhouse, American units then ran down from Kettle Hill and through an exposed valley to join the pitched battle at San Juan Hill. In the descent, Roosevelt tried to rally men behind him, but according to Schubert, only 5 heard him, and the noise and the confusion. Regrouping slowed him further. Meanwhile, other black and white troops took control of a second hill. Sergeant George Berry of the 10th Cavalry, a Buffalo soldier, carried the colors of both his regiment and that of the 3rd Regiment he got from a wounded white soldier and planted him atop the San Juan Hill. Overall, writes military historian Roger D. Cunningham, the black troops made significant contributions to the speedy victory, earning the 5 medals of honor and 29 certificates of merit for their gallantry under fire. One Buffalo soldier named Edward Lee Baker received the Medal of Honor for his gallantry on July 1st, 1898. The medal citation reads, left cover and under fire, and rescued a wounded comrade from drowning. Some 26 Buffalo soldiers died in the fighting. So, Roosevelt did not get to the top of the San Juan Hill until the fighting was over. Of course, he didn't make it over there, right? Said Jerry Too Silly, author of The Roughest Riders, the untold story of the black soldiers in the Spanish-American War. But of course, waiting up there was 6 hand-picked reporters by him. They gave him the big reception. The media loved him because he was a colorful character and an adventurer. He was a great copy. So, he didn't go over there until it was the press that was up there. Reporters on the scene helped burnish his legend. The well-known fiction writer and award-winning correspondent Richard Harding Davis, whom Roosevelt had befriended before the war, wrote how during the ascent of Kettle Hill, the ambitious lieutenant colonel on horseback lunged from behind the regular troops to speed their advance, and how he galloped repeatedly between rifle pits to inspire black soldiers and rough riders alike. So they wrote stories saying he was inspiring the black soldiers and the rough riders. He was an inspiration to them. No one who saw Roosevelt take that ride expected he would finish it alive. Davis breathlessly reported. It looked like foolhardiness, but as a matter of fact, set the pace with his horse and inspired his men. Watching Roosevelt, he added, made you feel that you would like to cheer. Roosevelt later commissioned a painting renowned artist, Frederick Remington, of this charge up the hill, a memorable but somewhat fictionalized image of the cowboy soldier. The immediate aftermath of the war, Roosevelt praised the role of the Buffalo Soldiers. No one can tell whether it was the Rough Riders or the black men of the 9th Cavalry who came forward with the greater courage to offer their lives in the service of their country. But in a book titled The Rough Riders, published a year later with an eventual presidential run in mind, Roosevelt revised his narrative, writing, Negro troops were shirkers in their duties and would only go as far as they were led by white officers. Y'all see that, right? All of their, bravery that they did. Now they took it all from you and said you only did it because white people told you to do it. After he fell, remember his horse got snagged. He was behind everybody else. He wasn't even in the war. The only time he appeared was when all the cameras was around him. Right? Buffalo Soldiers became a symbol of hope. The following year, 1900, Roosevelt was elected Vice President of the United States. He became president in September 1901 after President William McKinley's assassination. On their return home, Buffalo Soldiers were briefly feted as war heroes, but they soon found that the uniforms didn't shield them from the indignity of segregation or from racial violence and terrorism. So even though they went and did all this fighting to increase America's prosperity, they still came back home and was treated as third-class citizens in their own country, right? For many black Americans, although Buffalo Soldiers stood as a symbol of hope, America's race heroes of the time. Their service and valor were celebrated in black media, black media, drama, poetry, and art, which is, they call themselves the Rough Riders, right? Negroes had little at the turn of the century to help sustain our faith in ourselves, except the pride we took of the 9th and 10th Cavalry, the 24th and 25th Infantry, wrote Rayford Logan, a seminal African-American historian. Many Negro homes had prints of the famous charge of the colored troops of San Juan Hill. They were Ralph Bunchy, Marion Anderson, Joe Lewis, and Jackie Robinson. So they had a picture of all of the soldiers that went over and fought.
Go
ahead.
And so, Harry, that you should say that, sir, because if you look at it, that just goes to show you how much Esau hates us. Because it's like every time we go to war for them, it's the same results, even back then. We come home and look how we got treated.
Treated like crap, man.
Spit on, beat down.
Basically,
Oh,
they
copy.
treat.
Go ahead, sir.
I'm just saying, treated like doo doo. That's how we got treated. And we went and fought. We made America so much money, man. America is a superpower on this earth. Not because of America. If you listen to Americans, they say it's all because of them. Not the blacks or the Hispanics that was here. We had nothing to do with that. Right? According to them. But if you know anything about the Bible, you know anything about anything that happens when it comes to the children of Israel, any nation that was the most powerful at any time had you as slaves. All of them. Egypt. Who else? Mesopotamia. Right? You had the Persians and the Medes, the Akkadians. You built the Great Wall of China. You go to all these places that was great. Rome, Greece. Do I got to keep going on? You built all of them. And now the United States, Spain, France. What?
Canada with the hockey.
Yeah, Canada. We whooping their behinds in hockey now. All these places is great. Brazil. All of it is great because you here as a slave. That's why all these places is great, man. That's why Spain, they was doing very well when they had control over Cuba and Puerto Rico. They didn't want to give it up because you was a slave for them. You know, they got the British Virgin Islands. That's comes from Great Britain. They don't want to give that up. That's they slaves. Right? Anywhere you go, man, you rule over that place, right? You make it great. Right? All right. Any questions, anything anybody else want to bring up? All right, with that, pass the class over to Priesthood Officer to Pastor Yah.
That's a powerful history class again. You know what I'm saying? For your educational use by our real history, according to the Bible. With that, there's the I.S.U.P.K security announcements. We are the I.S.U.P.K start out 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York. Rule for a new brother and sister. When a new brother and sister come to the school, they are living for 6 months. They are here to be saluted on. They are here to set themselves of the world. If they need transportation, the teacher will arrange it. After 6 months, if a brother or sister has an interest in a particular person, he or she must get permission from the head to speak to a brother or sister. There's another 6 months in which the brother and sister will court each other. After the 6 month period, the brother and sister will get permission from the head to marry. Tithes, which is a commandment, the book of Numbers, chapter 18, verse 21, and the book of Malachi, chapter 3, verse 8 to 10. My Ishra, that means 10 in the Hebrew. 10% of every penny of any increase the Lord gives you. Give to the treasury department and teacher. Priest fund, free or offer a priest, not mandatory. Whatsoever amount you like to give. The next holy convocation is going to be the memorial of the blowing of trumpets. It's going to be on the 7th month, on the first day. They're going to be September 25th, sundown. You also can find that in the book of Leviticus, chapter 23 through 24 to 25. Remind Akim or walk in to check the bulletin board in the hallway. If any brother wants to be a trooper in the school, start wearing a black boot, shirt, pants, headband, and a scarf. Make sure you Google this address every time you head to the school. With that, give one curse salute to the teacher. Men of Israel, Amayim Sabat, Amayim, Barak, Yahweh Bashim Al Shabbalatah.
Yahweh Shem Shabbalatah.
What I said to you in Allah Shema Kadash is, may the Most High in the name of Christ bless you. Yat on the top me hands down classes.